Hi guys, I'm Ellen. Welcome to this video. This is a video where I wrap up the books that I have read in the months of June and July. I didn't do June last month just because I read so few books that I felt like it was pointless to do a wrap up, but that's what this is. If you want, you can also check out, I have a movie wrap up for the month of July as well as just like my life wrap up for July. So let's get started talking about the books. I always like to start with statistics. We're just gonna skip June's statistics because A, I don't have them in front of me, and B, there's just like so few that I really don't even want to see what the statistics for that is gonna be looking like. Well, in case you just want to know, in June I read a total of 2 books and they were both very short. But in July, I read 5 books. There's one not here because I returned it because I didn't like it. I can never remember what I do for statistics, but I think I do hardcover versus paperback. And so for July, I read 3 hardcovers and I read 2 paperbacks. The other book that I had read that I returned, it was a paperback. And then I read 3 books that came out in 2019, which I never do. I usually always read like backlisted books, and then 2 books that were not published in 2019. I read 4 books that were written by females and then 1 book that was written by a male. The next statistic is going to be pages. So these are all the pages that I read. Total is 1,502 pages, which is really good. I'm really starting to get out of my reading slump, which feels amazing. So that pretty much averages to about 48 pages a day, which is exactly what I want. I try to read at least like 50 pages a day, so it's looking good. Now for stars, it was actually a pretty decent star-wise month. I have 2 3 stars, 1 3.5 stars, 1 4 star, and 1 4.5 star. So average, I have 3.6 stars. If I am missing a statistic, I am terribly sorry. I literally, every time I do these, can never remember what statistics I decide to do. Oh wait, genre! Oh my god, I totally forgot about genre. I read 1 nonfiction, I read 1 contemporary, 1 sci-fi, and I guess 2 fantasies. So now let's talk about the books. Let's first start and talk about the books that I read in June, which were just these measly little 2. So the first one I read was Saga Volume 8. I am almost at the end-ish. I just have the 9th one to read and then we're all good. This one was not my favorite. I felt like this was, again, one of the books in the series that just was all like filler and like nothing really action-packed or exciting happened, or if it did, it was like very short and was like barely there. I really liked the ending of this one, so I'm excited to go into the 9th one once I get my hands on it. I don't really have much to say about it. It was okay. So I gave it 3 stars. And then I also read Macbeth because I'm trying to read a Shakespeare play every month this year. So for June I read Macbeth, and I guess, I don't know if maybe I was just expecting more, but this one was not a favorite of mine. I feel like lately I've been reading more of his comedies, so I've been trying to get into more of his dramas, and I do think I prefer his comedies over his dramas at this point. I mean, I still have to read a couple more dramas to really have a definitive opinion in that. This one just didn't do it for me, and to be honest, I don't know why. I was not invested in the characters, and I get why people like the character Macbeth in the sense of like, not because he's a good guy, he's totally not a good guy, but because he comes across as a good guy, but he does terrible things, and then you realize that he is not a good guy and he's a bad guy. I don't know, he has a very layered character. I just couldn't connect with any of these characters. I couldn't invest with them, so I just couldn't be on board or not on board with what they were doing. I was just kind of indifferent with whatever was going on. I mean, there were some parts that I did like, but overall, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Okay, now on to July. The first book I read is Enchantée by Guida Chalice. Now this was a fantasy standalone, but as I have just learned, it is now the first book in a series, which I'm kind of upset about just because I found it so cool to finally have a fantasy standalone, and that was like the main reason I picked it up. But I am also not mad that there's going to be more books in this series because I did enjoy this one. This did take me a while to read. It's a very slow paced read, but that didn't affect how much I enjoyed the story. It's like historical fiction mixed with fantasy. This takes place in Paris during the Revolution, and we follow Camille, who can do magic. She is living in poverty along with her sister and her horrible brother. And so finding this dress, she finds out that her family was part of like the rich aristocrat people. So when she puts on this dress and decides to use magic with it, she finds herself taking a new form in a sense where she is now looking like an aristocrat. So she calls herself a baroness, and she decides to do a bunch of gambling at the Palace of Versailles. And she then kind of has like two different worlds and two different people that she is. She's Camille, but then she's also Baroness. And she has two different groups of friends, and she finds herself tangled in this like world of magic where she learns that other people have magic, but not all those people are good. Some of them are very evil. It's a very interesting story. There is a romance in here as well, but the romance is not super heavy because we do mainly follow like the political intrigue and the magic and her conflicting feelings. I truly did enjoy this story, and I really liked the world and the magic and all the political intrigue that it had. This is definitely a unique story that stands out from all the other fantasies that are out there, for sure. And I think it does a really good job describing France and describing the setting, just describing everything. It was super well written. Sometimes it can be a little too descriptive, so if you're not into that, just be wary of that going into this. I didn't mind it too much. Usually I do, but I didn't mind it with this one. And it is very slow paced, like I said. And I'm not a huge on slow paced books, so I'm giving this 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The Royal Danish Egg. This is by Barb Goodwin and Doug Pennicas. This is the first book in the Lost Treasures series. This is a self-published book. A friend of mine is friends with the author and asked me to read it. He was like, you don't have to, but he told me the premise and it sounded really cool and interesting, so I decided to pick it up. And I did enjoy it, but I can see why it was self-published. I feel horrible saying that. But let me first talk about what this book is about. How they've described it, it's like a teenagery Indiana Jones. We follow Becca, who is trying to write her thesis on these Fabergé eggs, and she finds one, and she believes that there is some like secret hidden inside the Fabergé egg, but she can't get her hands on it. She eventually does, and she finds herself tangled in this web of like secret organizations and people hunting her down, trying to kill her, and this like mystery once we do find out what's in the egg. I don't want to spoil it or give anything away, but when we do finally find out what's in the egg, that leads to more secrets, and it's a really fun time, I have to say. But let me start with like the bad things and then I'll talk about the good things. So the writing, it was very generic writing, and the characters are very generic and very stereotypical, and I found myself predicting a few of the things that the characters were gonna do or were gonna say. I also didn't feel like it was Indiana Jones. If anything, I felt it was more like National Treasure, because those movies are fantastic. And this gave me a very like National Treasure vibe. So that was actually something I did like about it, how it felt very National Treasure-y, but I just feel like they shouldn't have described it as Indiana Jones because I did not see Indiana Jones in the book. The first half was like so-so, it was okay, but the second half really delivered. Some things just seemed too convenient or too easy and just like weren't explained well enough or in depth. But overall, I actually did enjoy my time reading it, even though it did feel so like generic and typical of a book. And to be honest, I think that's just because of the plot twist that I did not see coming, which involves something that I am a huge fan of. So when that happened, I just like started geeking out. And also the conclusion was super exciting and super fast paced. So I absolutely loved that, and I do want the next book, so hopefully they do come out with a second book. I think this is supposed to be a 4-book series, but I'm not 100% sure. So I gave this 3.5 stars. The next book that I read, Girl, Wash Your Face by Rachel Hollis. I have heard so many mixed reviews. Either you love it or you hate it. This is a nonfiction. It is not heavy on like the Christian aspects, but she does talk about Christianity a few times here and there throughout the book. So if that's not something you're into, I guess don't pick it up, but I didn't find it too much. This is just like a self-help book. It starts off with telling you like a lie that you tell yourself, and then a story that she puts with that lie, and it basically tells you how that's a lie you should not be telling yourself. And then at the end of each chapter, at the end of each lie, she tells you things that helped her stop thinking about that lie. So an example of a lie, come on, where's the chapter? Okay. I should be further along by now. That's something I have been like telling myself so much, that like where I am in life is not where I thought I was going to be. I feel like I should be further along in every aspect of my life, and I'm just not there. And so that actually was a good chapter for me to hear. But anyway, so it's like that's how it's formatted. So I actually really enjoyed the format of this book. I do think a lot of the things that were said in this book were things that like I already know, but they are also things that like are sometimes good to hear multiple times because you like keep forgetting. So overall, I did like it. I just didn't think it was unique or anything special, but I did give it 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Birthday by Meredith Russo. I'd only heard one booktuber talking about this book, and she said she really liked it, but when she talked about the story, it really intrigued me, so I immediately picked it up, and the day I bought it at the store was literally the day that I started reading it, and I read it within 3 days. I really liked this one. So we follow Eric and Morgan. They are 2 best friends. We follow them from when they're 13 to 18, and we just follow the days of their birthday because they were both born on the same day. So they had the same birthday, and they grew up kind of like pretty much grew up together. And so they're best friends. Eric is kind of like a star football player and like super cool, and Morgan is coming to terms with the fact that he is transgender, so he is actually a she. It's also this like lovely, not just like a lovely friendship, but also just like a lovely romance. I shouldn't say lovely, it's heartbreaking, okay guys? I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It's heartbreaking, but it is also very heartwarming. And I love books that can just do that to you. It can like rip apart your heart, but then put it back together, then rip it apart again, and then put it back together again, and it's just, I do have trigger warnings in here for suicide, transphobia, homophobia. I think that's about it. This was truly a great book, and it's nothing like I've ever read before. The main characters were also super likable, which I really enjoyed, and it definitely seemed like their friendship was a solid friendship because their friendship went through so many difficult times. Morgan went through a really difficult time with, you know, trying to come to terms with who she is, who he is, like what is happening, and I felt like that was written very realistically. And then I found out that the author is transgender as well, so that's why the voice of Morgan felt so realistic and accurate, because the author understands what that character is going through and what that character can feel like. So very well done of a book. I could not put it down. My only issue is that I really wish that at the end Morgan had a conversation with her dad about the fact that she is a she. We didn't get that conversation, and I would have really liked that conversation. It just kind of like jumped to like the next year in the future. So other than that, really liked this book a lot. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Highly recommend it. Okay, and then the last book that I read is the one that I don't own. I bought it, started reading it immediately, but I did finish the book. It was okay, so I only had like 2 days left to return it after I finished reading it, so I just wanted to return it so I can get my money back, because I actually bought the entire series, and since I wasn't going to continue with the series, I wanted to get my money back for all 3 of those books. But the book that I'm talking about is Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. I'm not saying this was a terrible book. Like, there were a lot of aspects about this book that I did like, but this is an adult sci-fi. It's the first book in a series. I believe it's called The Themis Files, and it's a book that I wanted to really love. I honestly thought I was going to give this entire series a 5 stars, but I ultimately didn't. I didn't connect with it, and I didn't love it as much as I wanted to. So with this series, or this first book actually mainly, we find like a bunch of random metal pieces throughout the world, and we find out that put together they create this like ginormous robot that has a bunch of advanced capabilities, and we find out that apparently aliens left them on Earth thousands of years ago, and we are now just finding them. That's pretty much the premise. I mean, we follow like the pilots of the robot, we follow the person that's in charge, we follow like a scientist, we follow a linguist, we follow a bunch of different people that are a part of this project. The way the story is told, I don't usually mind this format because I've read other books in this format and really enjoyed them, but I don't think the format worked quite well with this story. It's told just through interviews, and I think there were a few like diary entries here and there, but it was mainly just interview format. And that to me just, it didn't work with this book, just because I felt like it jumped so quickly to the next scene that like I was like sometimes had no idea what had happened in between, and I just felt like there were things that I was missing. And also too, it just made the timeline go so fast. Like, I think with the first book we go through like 5 years, and it's not even that long of a book. It's an interesting story, it's an interesting format. I just don't think I really connected with it, and I don't think it worked well for me. I just kind of felt indifferent to it, and I didn't feel attached to any of the characters. They all seemed not one-dimensional to me. I mean, one character felt one-dimensional, but the rest, they did feel multi-dimensional, but I didn't care about them. And also too, like, this book just felt like it was all telling and not showing, and I think that's why the format of interviewing didn't work for me, just because it was just kind of telling me instead of showing me what happened or what they're feeling. You know, it was just, I don't know, I just felt very disconnected from the book and uninterested. That doesn't mean I didn't hate it. There were aspects about it that I liked. That ending, I think the reason why I kept reading the book was because I was like, I really want the ending to bring it home and give me something super interesting that would make me want to continue. And to be honest, once I finished that book and I read that ending, I was contemplating actually going to the second book, but ultimately I decided not to. But that was a really good ending, and I really enjoyed the beginning. It lost me somewhere in the middle, but overall, didn't enjoy it as much as I really wanted to. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Alright, and that is it for this book wrap-up. Please also go check out my movie wrap-up for the month of July, as well as my life wrap-up for the month of July, and I will see you guys later with more videos. Bye!